In which case we're now going to move on to the statement, and I call Secretary of State for Defence, Grant Shapps.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I'd like to update the House on a data incident involving activity by a malign actor. In recent days, the Ministry of Defence has identified indications that a malign actor gained access to part of the Armed Forces payment network. This is an external system completely separate to the MOD's core network, and it's not connected to the main military HR system. The House will wish to note that it is operated by a contractor, and there is evidence of potential failings by them, which may have made it easier for the malign actor to gain entry. A specialist security review of the contractor and their operations is underway, and appropriate steps will be taken. The contractor-operated system in question is held and holds personal data of regular and reserve personnel and some recently retired veterans. This includes names and bank details, and in a smaller number of cases, addresses. In response to this incident, Mr. Deputy Speaker, we've undertaken significant and immediate action, enacting a multi-point response plan to support and protect our people. And I'd like to provide the House with details of this 8-point plan this afternoon. First of all, we've immediately taken the system offline, and this has secured it against similar future threats. Secondly, we've launched a full investigation, drawing on Cabinet Office support and specialist external expertise to examine the potential failings of the contractor and to minimise the risk of similar incidents in the future. 3, whilst our initial investigations have found no evidence that any data has been removed, as a precaution, we have today alerted those service personnel affected through the chain of command. In addition, we're also sending out letters to a small number of veterans who've retired and who may have been affected as an additional precaution. The House will wish to note the vast majority of the UK veterans community are, however, unaffected. 4, specialist advice and guidance on data security has been shared and will be available on Gov UK later today. 5th, we've additionally set up a helpline to support individuals. The number for the helpline is 01249 596 665, and that helpline will be available from today. 6, we're providing a commercial personal data protection service for all service personnel, and this facility will constantly monitor each individual's personal data and notify them if there are any irregularities. Even though we don't believe that their information has been stolen, we intend to do this in order to bring further peace of mind. 7, welfare and financial advice is available where needed through each individual's chain of command. And 8, on becoming aware of the incident, MOD stopped the processing of all payments and isolated the system. And I want to provide further detail on this particular step. We're making changes to the system to ensure it is secure before recommencing payments through it, of course. And I can confirm, though, that in the meantime, all April salaries have been paid. Some service personnel will have experienced a slight delay in receiving some expense payments. However, we expect this to be fully resolved today, with the money in their accounts by Friday. Furthermore, I can confirm that we are ensuring all high-value payments remain unaffected. For example, all outstanding Forces Help to Buy and terminal benefit payments have been facilitated by alternative secure transfer. As mentioned, salary payments and pensions for veterans have not been affected, and we do not expect them to be in the future. Mr. Deputy Speaker, for reasons of national security, we can't release further details of the suspected cyber activity behind this incident. However, I can confirm to the House that we do have indications that this was the suspected work of a malign actor, and we cannot rule out state involvement. This incident is further proof that the UK is facing rising and evolving threats, and as I set out in my speech in Lancaster House in January, the world is, I'm afraid, becoming somewhat more dangerous. Last month, the government therefore announced an increase in defence spending to meet these new threats, reaching 2.5% of GDP by the end of the decade. Mr. Deputy Speaker, following this incident, I can also announce today that although this incident is entirely unrelated to our own MOD networks, we are also reviewing all personnel data to ensure our people's data is secure. This was the work, as I say, of a malign actor who compromised a contractor-run network entirely separate from the MOD core system. However, as I've said, we cannot at this stage rule out state involvement from elsewhere. This 8-point plan outlines the immediate and significant action we're taking to protect the most precious resource, our people. And even though this has occurred on a contractor system with a malign actor involved, and we can't rule out that foreign state involvement, I want to apologise to the men and women who are affected by this. It should not have happened, and this 8-point plan seeks to ensure that it is put right and that it cannot happen again. I commend the statement to the House.
John Healey.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. There is deep concern in this House about the grave security breach, and the House will accept and note the Defence Secretary's apology to Armed Forces personnel. So we welcome the Defence Secretary's statement this afternoon and his multi-point plan, and thank him for early sight of it. There will indeed be serious concern in the MOD that news of this big data breach was splashed across the media before the Defence Secretary could set out the facts to Parliament. And my overriding concern is for the safety of serving personnel and veterans affected, worried about the risk to them and their families, hearing first about the data being hacked from the media and not from the MOD. Our military put their own security at risk when they serve on the front line, and the very last thing they should have to worry about is their data security back home. Any such hostile action against our forces is utterly unacceptable, and their protection must be the first order priority for the Defence Secretary, whether on operations abroad or for their data at home. Despite the Defence Secretary's statement, he still has many serious questions to answer. On the breach itself, who held the data that was hacked? When was it discovered? When were ministers told? How was it leaked to the press? On the contractor, Defence Business Services say Shared Services Connected Limited has the MOD contract for core payroll and other business services. How many contracts does SSCL or its parent company, Sopra Steria, have with the MOD? What action has been taken by other government departments with similar SSCL contracts? On forces personnel, how many serving personnel and veterans have been hit by the hack? Has every serving full-timer and reservist been affected? And what support is being offered? On last night's media reports, has a leak inquiry been launched? Mr. Deputy Speaker, the MOD's data security record is getting worse while threats against the UK continue to rise. There has been a threefold increase in MOD data breaches in the last 5 years, with 35 separate MOD breaches reported to the Information Commissioner's Office and a £350,000 fine last December. Subcontractors are well known as the soft underbelly of security, and this latest hack raises serious questions about how the MOD manages its outsourced services. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the media have clearly been briefed that China is behind the hack, but the Defence Secretary only tells us about a malign actor. Now, the government rightly has a very rigorous system before official accusations or attributions are made. But if this data breach is found to be carried out by a hostile state, it would represent a very serious threat to our national security. And the government have been warned. The ISC committee confirmed in its China report last year. Cyber attacks by hostile states now happen daily, and our wider armed forces community are being targeted. But the committee also found no cross-government China strategy, completely inadequate resourcing and defence intelligence with no systematic record of resources focused on China. Mr. Deputy Speaker, the Defence Secretary knows. We are united in this House. We will not stand for any such attacks. And with threats increasing, such flaws in our cybersecurity must be fixed. Only then will we make Britain secure at home and strong abroad.
Well, I thank the Right Honourable Gentleman for his words about the united way in which this House tackles issues like this. And actually, there's much of what he said that I can agree with. He asked a number of questions. I'll try and just rattle off some responses to him. The chosen day to announce this was today in order to ensure that we would be able to secure the systems and back up, make sure everyone had their payments made, even if it weren't through those systems. So the media release last night was coincidental and unwelcome as far as we were concerned. Unfortunately, of course, a lot of people were involved in this. He asked how many, 272,000 is the number of personnel who have been affected. To stress that means that it's up to that number. The number still being refined, it will probably end up lower, but nonetheless it's a large number of people, and people may have noticed that bank payments weren't made, so some of the media will have picked up on that. He's right to say that personnel and their welfare is our absolute first and primary priority, and we absolutely agree with that, which is why I hope he'll agree that the 8-point plan heavily focuses and consists of ensuring that they are getting every bit of help and support required, including, although we don't think that the data is necessarily stolen, making the assumption that it has been in order to ensure that they're getting support required, and including through their own data monitoring services that we're providing to each and every one of them, whether affected or not in this particular case. He has named the contractor that was involved. I can confirm that's the correct name, SSCL. And as I mentioned in my comments, we have both ordered a full review of their work within MOD, but have gone further than that as well, and I've requested from the Cabinet Office a full review of their work across government as well as within MOD, which is underway. I also made mention briefly to specialists being brought in to carry out investigation for forensic sense against the way that this has operated. Data breaches and the level of attack is nothing new, but he is right to point out, and the House will be aware, these attacks are growing to the extent that the MOD and its networks are under attack millions of times per day, and they successfully repel those attacks millions of times per day. I want to stress again, particularly for servicemen and women watching or listening, that this does not contain data which is on main MOD systems, which is of even greater concern to us, therefore. And it is right that we invest in protecting the systems to make sure that these data attacks cannot be successful and are repelled. And I would gently say to the Right Honourable Gentleman, as I think he might expect me to, that one of the best ways to do that is to invest in defence, which is why we are committed to 2.5% increase with a fixed timeline and a plan to pay for that, because it does mean that we'll be able to do more things, including investing further in cyber security.
Jeremy Quinn.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, SSCL was a joint venture with the Cabinet Office. I think there was a legacy minority stake held until last year, and as is public, the other it also provides services from memory to the Metropolitan Police, the Home Office and the Ministry of Justice. So I absolutely welcome the fact that the Minister is saying this is going to be across government. Absolutely all areas of government that is exposed needs to be doing the necessary. What specialist support is the Secretary of State receiving from elsewhere in government, and when might the malign actor be named?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, as my honourable friend will know, the process of getting towards naming, if indeed there is a state-sponsored actor involved, is a specific process set out by the Butler reforms, and does take some time to reach those conclusions. But he asked specifically about the work that will be ongoing with the particular contractor. The Cabinet Office calling in specialist analysts who will be carrying out that work over the coming weeks. And these are two separate tracks. So you've got both the contractor within MOD, but separately in different places across government that he rightly identifies. And I just want to sort of stress to the House, because I suspect this will be brought up quite a number of times, we expect very high standards from our contractors working with the lives and livelihoods of our service personnel, so we would take all appropriate actions.
Martin Doherty-Hughes.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. I also thank the Secretary of State for advance notice as well. There isn't really much to disagree with the questions from the Shadow Defence Secretary, I have to say. I maybe take just one little bit extra. But in addition to what the Secretary of State said in relation to a malign actor, I'm sure maybe the Right Honourable Member for Chingford and Woodford Green won't miss the wall when he asks the Secretary of State a question, because I see that he is bobbing. So let me maybe come back to the contractor, because there is a bit of a concern here, because they already have previous when it comes to delivering government contracts. Notably, I believe, a scandal over NHS business services and the running of immigration application systems. So can the Secretary of State advise the House, given the seriousness of this issue in terms of the Ministry of Defence, do they have confidence that the contractor is able to continue to deliver this contract? And would they give consideration to a review of this specific contract armed forces payment network element, that it should be brought back in-house, delivered by the MOD, and not delivered by some conglomerate based in Paris?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I can confirm, obviously, that there is already that review underway, and I can go further by saying that I am deeply interested in the way that, of course, this contractor, or indeed any others, behaves. I can't jump straight to the conclusion of that research, and I don't think he would expect me to jump straight to the conclusion of the security review. But to answer his question in a more straightforward way, if it were found that there were a better way to do this, and we can't be satisfied on security, then of course we would consider the other options, such as the ones he suggested.
Alicia Cairns.
Mr Deputy Speaker, with 1 in 5 residents of Rutland being veteran or serving, this news will be very concerning to our communities. But in the last 6 weeks, the Chinese Communist Party has concluded to be responsible for hacking our armed forces, conducting a cyber attack on the Electoral Commission, cyber attacks on French and British MPs, a German aide was arrested on espionage charges, and 2 British men were charged with obtaining information useful to an enemy. Attacking our institutions and people who defend or represent our people is not the act of an ally or a friend, and the police, the British police, have explicitly deemed this the actions of an enemy. So what is my right honourable friend doing to make sure we finally get a cross-government consensus and get the Foreign Office changing our position on this? These are not the acts of a friend or an ally. These are the actions of a country who considers itself anathema to our values, our activities, and those who defend our interests.
Well, my honourable friend knows that we take the view that it is absolutely wrong for members of Parliament to be in any way sanctioned by other countries. And I know that she has been sanctioned. I've been sanctioned in other areas, not by that particular country. And she's right to point out those cases that have been proven, including when the Deputy Prime Minister stood at this dispatch box and talked about electoral data recently. However, it is not the case in this circumstance, and I don't want to mislead the House, that the connection, that there is a proven connection. And I do just want to stress that although we can see a malign actor is involved, we have yet to make the full connection to a state. Although, as I pointed out in my statement, I can't rule out that that might be the conclusion. We have no evidence to conclude that way yet.
Derek Twigg.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I ask the Secretary of State, when did the MOD last carry out an audit or review of the security precautions put in place to stop a cyber attack with this contractor, if it did at all?
State.
Well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I can tell them actually specific to the MOD estate that we do it all the time, as in every day. With regard to this particular contract, I am also aware that we have been in contact with them about their cybersecurity arrangements. For the purposes of national security, I can't go into the detail in this House, but I can perhaps provide them with a little bit of further context if that's helpful separately.
So Julian Lewis.
I welcome the fact that the helpline has been established so quickly and encourage the government to be proactive in publishing advice on what people can do to secure their bank accounts, for example. But what specialist advice does the MOD routinely seek before outsourcing data on service personnel to external contractors? And what standards must be verified before such outsourcing to a civilian organisation is allowed to take place?
Well, it is obviously completely unacceptable for a contractor to leave our brave servicemen and women in this position. So we take it incredibly seriously and are very concerned by what has happened. He asks about the checks. Of course, this is a contract which long predates current ministers, but we're of course checking through the details of that at considerable speed because, as you can imagine, we think the contractor has very many questions to answer, and I know that the ones that he asks will be included in those answers.
Neil Cole.
Mr. Speaker, the Intelligence and Security Committee reported last year that the government was not protecting the UK sufficiently against cyber attacks, including from China, including specifically on our armed forces. The Minister says he's sorry today, but why did he fail to listen?
Well, as I mentioned a few moments ago, we actually successfully defend against millions of attacks, millions and millions of attacks each day at the MOD, and in common with all critical national infrastructure, other departments, many businesses, the threat is very real. It's one of the reasons that on this side of the House we've committed to increasing, with a timeline attached, to 2.5% of our GDP, because we will have more money to spend on defending. Now, it's one thing to wish that defence, it's another thing to actually act, which is what we've done on this side.
So Ian Duncan-Smith.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I welcome my honourable friend to the dispatch box. Can I just raise a particular point with him? We know now that the British government was warned by the security services in America nearly 2 years ago that the Electoral Commission's system was hacked, and also that a number of MPs had also been hacked here in the UK. We now discover that in that 2-year period, the government said nothing about China's role in all of this. It was China, and they were warned at the time. We now know, in fact, that far more MPs, nearly 40, were actually hacked, and that was never reported. So I have a concern, Mr. Deputy Speaker, that although the government now refuses to say who it is, we may spend another 2 years before we ever discover or say publicly. So can I ask him this very simple question? Given that the FBI director himself has said China has a cyber espionage capacity so vast that it dwarfs everybody else, knowing now the record, as the chairman of the Foreign Affairs Committee said, of all the attacks directly on us here, can I ask him why, given in 2023, the Deputy Prime Minister said the government was considering placing the People's Republic of China into the enhanced tier of the Foreign Influence Registration Scheme, given all of that, why in heaven's name don't we take the decision to place this malign actor into that enhanced place and then make sure we deal with them accordingly?
Well, I do welcome my right honourable friend's comments about attribution. I think it's absolutely right. Where MPs have been hacked, where the electoral register is hacked, he's encouraging me at the dispatch box to therefore jump to the conclusion that the malign actor involved is China as well. And I'm simply unable to do that at this stage. You'd expect me to follow due process, but I rather support his view that if attribution is required, that should happen in a timely and speedy manner, and I will undertake from this dispatch box to ensure that in this case that is what happens, and that we do not get into a situation where many months or years pass by without it being mentioned.
Richard Ford.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The malign actor didn't need to access the Armed Forces payment network to find out the salary of a British private soldier. A quick search of Google, or indeed Baidu, would reveal that a salary for a British soldier on completion of initial training is less than £24,000 per year, less than the average UK salary of £35,000 per year. Russia is currently paying a starting salary to its soldiers of over 2.5 million rubles for fighting in Ukraine. Will the data breach by this Conservative government's contractor shame the government into paying some of our lowest paid service people a decent salary?
Mr. Deputy Speaker, that was creative, if nothing else. I would say that to the honourable gentleman, the fact that we paid a nearly 10% pay increase, 9.7% last year, to many ranks of our armed forces, and the fact that this party is committed to 2.5% with a path to it, a pledge which I've not heard repeated from over there, rather suggests that we're prepared to do something about pay and retention. I haven't heard the same from the parties opposite.
James Gray.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, I very much welcome the great seriousness with which the Secretary of State is taking this appalling breach of data. It really has been awful. I'm glad he's doing it taking it so seriously. I'm also convinced that the prime contractors have all got very significant cybersecurity requirements. It's extremely unlikely that a prime contractor would be hacked in this way. But my understanding is that subcontractors and subcontractors down the food chain do not have the same level of cyber control at all. They have to fulfill something called the Cyber Essentials Accreditation, but even that is not compulsory. Will the Secretary of State now undertake to look into the way in which subcontractors and subcontractors are checked for cybersecurity and potentially make this accreditation compulsory rather than voluntary?
I think the concerning thing about this particular incident is that SSCL would be in this context, a primary rather than a subcontractor, but he's absolutely right to raise the wider issue, and yes is the answer. Our intention and indeed our instruction now is to go right the way through. As I said in my initial comments, we take this incredibly seriously. It is unacceptable for this to have happened, and we will take every possible measure once we got to the forensic truth of what's happened here, including against the contractor and indeed any subcontractors.
Justin Matters.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. I can understand why the Secretary of State is reluctant to name China, but it seems I think every member in this room believes that they are probably responsible for this, and certainly that's what the media are reporting. So I do hope he's able to commit to a very clear timescale when he can come back with some clarity on that. But I want to just ask him about the point that's been made by a number of other members about how the outsourced contractors are clearly the weak spot in our system. Is he committing to examine and analyse every single subcontractor with a view to looking at bringing them back in-house in light of the threats that we're now facing?
Yes, of course, the MOD, as with most militaries, uses a lot of contractors and subcontractors. But to answer his question directly, yes, the answer is that the review will encompass all of that work, and yes, if we find or believe that we can do this better, and I think many members may conclude that this wouldn't have happened had it been held in the MOD and through our own systems, then that is indeed what we would endeavour to do.
Bob Seeley.
Very much indeed, Mr. Speaker. Firstly, I'd like to thank the Minister for his call this morning. It is a little frustrating to be told that one's bank details and national insurance number are winging their way to Beijing or wherever they've gone. And considering I was also caught up in the IPAC breach, I'm wondering if I'm currently in the running for being the most hacked MP in Britain. Can I just ask a quick question? If it was a weak security with the contractor, does that mean it was not a state actor? And if this contractor had a high level of security, do we now assume, or do we assume it is more likely that there is a state actor behind it? And if there is a state actor behind it, we assume it's China, because China has form in stealing mass data, and they've done it with the US federal government, for instance. Thank you.
Can I start by thanking my honourable and gallant friend for his service, and I'm sorry that he had to receive that phone call about what's happened. I do want to stress, actually, that we do not believe the data has necessarily been stolen, and so there is a danger here of just running a couple of steps ahead. What we've done is to respond with the 8-point plan as if it has been stolen. because we think that that is the best position to put everybody, himself included, in, given the seriousness of this potential breach. I will struggle to answer the detail of the rest of his questions for the national security reasons that I hope he'll understand. But once again, we'll undertake the next stage of this, which is actually a process set out with the Butler reforms, is carried out quickly and efficiently.
Weston.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. We know that the government considers it likely that China is responsible for this hack, coming hot on the heels of the revelation that they were also responsible for the hack of the Electoral Commission, as confirmed in March of this year. If it does transpire that China are again responsible for this, will the government finally stop talking tough on China, labelling them an epoch-defining challenge, and start acting accordingly, taking serious measures up to and, for instance, diplomatic expulsions?
Mr Deputy Speaker, I think I've outlined the government's position on this a couple of times, but I do want to say he says consider it likely. I'm saying I can't rule it out, and those are two different things. We do need to allow for this forensic work to go ahead before we start attributing. But clearly, if there is attribution, then there are also consequences.
Mark Francois.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Well, at least it wasn't Capita. But this will be very worrying for service personnel, their families and veterans. And they'll be disrespected that the government seems to have briefed that it was China overnight and then not had the nerve to confirm that in the House today because someone rang up from the Foreign Office and said, don't do that. When, oh when, are we going to start standing up to the Chinese in a way that they clearly are not frightened to stand up to us?
I do just indeed, it's not his favourite contractor on this particular occasion, as he says, but nonetheless, we will be carrying out a very comprehensive review of their work. And I just want to again make it absolutely clear to the House, Mr Deputy Speaker, we did absolutely everything that we could to avoid this being made public until I had the opportunity to come to this House. We proactively endeavoured to ensure that our own approach towards removing the data from being online, closing that system down, ensuring the personnel were paid, making sure that the alternative payments system were in place for expenses and other things, and all of that could happen, ideally before we came to this House. We most certainly did not wish to see nor brief out the story. Unfortunately, because there were a large number of people impacted or potentially impacted, it was almost impossible to expect for people not to then go and talk about it, and I believe that's how it has come into the public domain. But my honourable friend's absolutely right about this. I mean, he is a champion for ensuring that these contractors do the jobs that they're actually paid to do, and we are now crawling through all of the detail. And as I've said before, we will not leave this hanging. We will take every appropriate action, because as he might imagine, I, as Defence Secretary, and the entire team are very concerned about the welfare of our personnel and the brave men and women who do not deserve to have this happen to them, and we do not want to see it happen in the name of the MOD either.
Jim Shannon.
I thank the Secretary of State very much for his statement and for his positive response to try and assure our personnel. Having seen this type of data breach in Northern Ireland with the PSNI, information on officers and staff leaked, and the stress was palatable. What steps are the Secretary of State and Government taking to ensure that the staff feel safe and protected, and that there is funding available for service personnel protection if necessary? Thank you.
I think one of the big differences in this particular case is this is not someone who was like a member of the armed forces or personnel who did something wrong. This was done to them. It wasn't someone opening an attachment or something of that nature. This is something that has happened through the system that the contractor ran. He's absolutely right to focus, as I hope I have, and I think the whole House has today, on the personnel themselves and what it means to them, and in particular to be reassuring them this afternoon, and I'm grateful for the attitude and approach of the House, because I think it will have largely done that for service personnel and women. I won't reiterate each of the 8 points, but both through the chain of command, the phone number that is available now, the information going on Gov.uk, and the wraparound services, including the fraud checking access that they'll now individually have access to. Through all of those things and many others, I hope it does bring reassurance, remembering that we don't think that the data is necessarily stolen, but that we are behaving as if it is in order to provide absolute security.
Bernard Jenkin.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I thank the Secretary of State for coming so speedily to this House with a great deal in his statement about what action is being taken. But can I express both concern about reluctance to name the malign actor, but also the tendency about the tendency of things to get lost in the Cabinet Office, which has become such a morass of activities. Who in the Cabinet Office is charged with this responsibility? Is it the National Security Advisor? Which Cabinet Committee is overseeing this? Would it be the National Security Council itself? And I hope so. And who is the DCDS responsible for cybersecurity? And who will be responsible for making sure that all these elements are working together to conduct this review very thoroughly? And can I suggest that he brings forward a white paper very shortly on the lessons learned from this incident and others to provide the reassurance that not least our service personnel need?
Yes, well, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I just want to stress again, it's not that I'm reluctant to name the malign actor, it's that we need more information before I can do so. So it's not a sort of trying to avoid telling the House this information, it's we need to be certain before we're able to do that. He asked who in the Cabinet Office. I spoke directly with the Deputy Prime Minister on this to make sure that it's set from the very highest levels. And he asked who has overall responsibility. The excellent Chief of Defence people, Phil Halley, has responsibility. He's very, very good. He has chaired now, I think we're up to 11 meetings internally on this in order to get everything ready for this afternoon. As I said before, it's really with deep regret that we didn't quite make it into today before news of this started to break late last night. But he is responsible and will continue to be responsible for the efforts.
James Sunderland.
Mr. Deputy Speaker, thank you. As an affected veteran myself, I do feel that responsibility of representing and championing my former colleagues in this matter. So could the Defence Secretary please assure me in 3 particular areas? Firstly, that the appropriate diplomatic protest has or will be made to the guilty party. Secondly, that assurance will be given to the House in due course that the firewall protocols given to defence contractors will match or exceed that given to the MOD itself. And thirdly, that the information that's been hacked, if indeed it has been hacked, will be sacrosanct. In other words, that no malign actor can gain access to bank accounts after this event.
Well, I thank my honourable and gallant friend. He makes 3 excellent points. I can absolutely assure him the guilty party will, as he puts it, sort of be brought to, or perhaps didn't quite put it, but be brought to book. I can also assure him that the MOD was not responsible for failing to issue correct instructions in terms of the contractual requirements to keep this data safe. And I just want to say that I will, because I strongly feel the House on all sides have pushed this point hard. I will make sure this does not get buried or lost in a process, and I will return to this House. I can't promise to do that in the next few days. It will take a while to do because the Butler process takes a while, but I will not allow it to drop, and the House has my undertaking on that issue.
Jason McCartney.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Can I just delve into how veterans are being reassured that their data isn't being used, for example, by financial scammers? As a former Royal Air Force veteran myself, I'm proudly president of the RAF's Association in Huddersfield, and I know this is an issue they'll be very, very worried about. And will he be using forces charities like RAFA, the Royal British Legion, the RF Benevolent Fund, SAFA, and many more to reassure veterans that their data won't be used by financial scammers?
Yeah, my honourable friend will be pleased to hear we have actually written to each of those organisations today actually to enlist their support, but also to provide the detail and information to them that the House has been privy to this afternoon. And in answer to his specific question, we have a commercial organisation who will now be monitoring the personal data for the individuals affected. That would include, for example, if it was used in a suspicious way, if it appeared on the dark web or any other outcome. So in a way, there will be an additional layer of security attached to these individuals. Again, I can confirm that as of this moment, we've seen no suspicious activity at all on those accounts.
Sir John Redwood.
Is there any indication of how the thief wanted to use this data if they have actually got it? And have all the staff been advised to change accounts and passwords and access to internet in every way so that no harm of a further nature can occur?
The answer is no to the first point. There's no indication. And to the second point, yes, our regular approach, and indeed as somebody with a MOD account, you have to change your passwords regularly to continue to use them. So those sort of security measures are in place. People don't need to change their bank accounts as a result of this, apart from anything else. If somebody was going to use someone's bank details to make a payment somewhere else, that would be technically difficult to do in any way. Case to a new account, it would require two-factor authentication. So it's not necessary for people to change their accounts, and the monitoring service will provide an overlay of additional reassurance to them.
Tobias Alwood.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. Could I welcome the Defence Secretary's statement here today in qualifying the scale of this breach, but also the operational changes that he's going to introduce. More strategically, it does illustrate how the changing character of conflict is impacting our world, with the digital terrain being as important as the physical. But that said, had this been a physical, a kinetic attack on MOD main building, this place here would be demanding some form of proportionate response. Indeed, you could even argue that that would be an Article NATO 5 situation. So could I ask the Secretary of State to consider this bigger picture, because the rules of engagement, Geneva Conventions, are out of date. And the Secretary of State is absolutely right to say threats are rising and they are evolving. But we do need to address how errant nations are held to account and what constitutes a proportionate response to a cyber attack.
It's certainly true to say that there's a malign actor involved. We know that. It is possible, and I can't rule out that it's attached to a country. But as soon as I say that, everyone assumes it therefore is attached to a country, and I'm not in a position to confirm that at this point, simply because the work is required, and it is incredibly detailed forensic work to get to that point. Of course, he's right that people, in some senses, differentiate between an attack which is a physical one, an attack which is a cyber attack, but both can be incredibly serious and have enormous consequences. Again, I want to stress in this case, because we don't believe that the information has in fact been stolen, and because we're monitoring it through these 8 different measures very carefully, there is a degree of we've caught it and controlling it. But his wider point is, of course, absolutely correct.
Jesse Norm.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy Speaker. The Secretary of State has been absolutely clear about the serious nature of this breach, and he's said so several times in the dispatch box. He's also said that the contractor failed to follow MOD guidelines and therefore is culpable to some degree, as far as we can see so far. So my question is simply this. What sanctions are in place to penalise that contractor? And what sanctions will he apply at the limit if they are found to be in breach? And finally, since he's mentioned that addresses have also potentially been leaked, how many addresses roughly? Because I personally am deeply concerned not just about bank details, but about the safety and well-being of those soldiers.
Well, I absolutely share his concern about the safety and well-being of the soldiers. Thankfully, very few addresses is the answer, a very tiny number. But the point about the sanctions of what would happen, again, is slightly to jump the order of events. We have to actually be confident to be able to run through the audit trail of exactly what has happened. But I will, again, make it clear from this dispatch box that if it is the case that there has been negligence involved, and clearly I think he understands that the whole House will, that is our concern this afternoon, then we will take the strongest possible action as a result.
David Mundell.
Thank you, Mr Deputy Speaker. Can I seek my honourable friend's reassurance that there is cross-government working to identify the vulnerabilities in the system? We've heard this afternoon that because a subcontractor was involved, that was identified as being a vulnerable point. Recently, in my own constituency, in Dumfries and Galloway, my constituents had their medical records hacked because it was identified that it was a small rural authority and therefore more vulnerable. So are we across government, across the United Kingdom, actually seeking out these vulnerabilities to make our data safer from malign actors and indeed plain criminals?
Well, I certainly reassure my right honourable friend that the reason that I immediately asked the Cabinet Office to be involved is because although I can do those checks on that contractor and others across the MOD or MOD-related contracts, I can't do that across the rest of the government, but that is exactly the job that the Cabinet Office will now undertake. When data is stolen like this, or rather exposed and potentially stolen, it causes a great deal of concern, and what we want to do is make sure that cannot happen. And I just reiterate again, this is not data that was being held by the MOD systems, and it did not affect the MOD systems, but I recognise as Secretary of State that our responsibility extends to whomever is holding the data for our personnel, and again I want to apologise to them. This should never have happened, and we will make sure that it is put right.
Richard Graham.
The Defence Secretary has reassured us that there's no evidence yet of any data having been removed, and there's no suggestion that the MOD's core system and HR network has been compromised. But can my right honourable friend confirm if there's any evidence yet of ransomware being used? What assessment has he made of any data being published? And although he reassured my right honourable friend for Hereford that the number of addresses that have been accessed is small, could he confirm that those veterans whose addresses have been accessed will be advised accordingly so they can take, if need be, security protections? And then lastly, on the wider points, can that telephone helpline be used by any who are concerned about late payment of miscellaneous expenses? And will he relay to the Deputy Prime Minister my strong view that actually the time is right for a cyber reinsurance, in the same way that we created flood a while back, precisely to deal with the likely costs for smaller authorities like those that were alluded to of having to repair their cyber defences against such future attacks?
It's characteristic of my honourable friend to include 5 questions, and here's one. Ransomware, no evidence. Data published, no evidence. Very small number of addresses, and yes, those people will be contacted individually or as a group if need be. Late payments, this actually is unlikely to cause much of a difficulty. As I said, that will all be resolved by today. And money in people's accounts either now or by the end of the week. However, if personnel have experienced any particular issues, they should take that through an issue through their chain of command. The phone number is also available, and individual cases would be looked at on a case-by-case basis, as he would expect. I think he's probably taking me slightly out of my area on cyber which I think will be one for the Cabinet Office to consider. It sounds like a smart idea, but I'm afraid he's got me outside my tracks.
As he waited very patiently and asked the last 5 questions, I let him get away with it. I'd like to thank the Secretary of State for his statement today and for responding to questions for over 3/4 of an hour. Thank you very much.